years and years. And we sort of contracted with the recession because the stuff that was happening out in the suburbs in the rest of Florida really stopped. There was no suburban development for retail. Certainly there wasn't a big need for office buildings in some of those markets. So we sort of pulled back, and now we're going back up and pushing into it. But the integrated investment management is just pretty much another way to say what I explained to you earlier. And this is patting ourselves on the back. What do we got next? Pretty much what I already told you. Ability to execute. One of the things you'll see, and I think the reason we've been around for 50 years, 56 years, is execution. We can all come up with great ideas. We collectively, you and me, we can all sit in a room and come up with a great investment idea, a great development plan. Look on paper, it's going to have great returns. It all makes sense, but if you can't execute and get it built in our business, then what's the good of doing it? And the execution side, here with Jessica, the execution side is really complicated. It is not as simple as I go hire a contractor, hire an architect, and I come back and go, here it is. And when you hear about some of the challenges of that shopping center we're talking about in Hollywood, just unforeseen things that just really kill you on a deal, especially when you're talking about things that are 5 or 6% of your total project cost. That will throw your returns off pretty badly. Ability to execute. Pretty much what we talked about here. Strategy, it's a broad base. We found that by having multiple product types, we can withstand real estate cycles better. When office sucks, retail is good. When retail is bad, office seems to be good. We dabbled in industrial, but we're not that good at it. I say we're not that good at it. We could be just fine at it, but there's guys who do industrial for a living who are so competitive and are able to do it for such low returns that we just chose not to be in that business. But it really is, it's a broad base. I mean, these are office buildings in Jacksonville we built, shopping center, Jacksonville we built. We bought the SunTrust Financial Center in downtown Miami with an institutional partner. We sold it. Shopping centers, acquisition of office buildings, old shopping center, bought it, renovated it, put Fresh Market in, turned a basically 8-cap shopping center into a 6-cap shopping center over a 2-year period. You guys are all up on your cap rate stuff. Yeah, 200 basis point move on your cap rates is pretty big. I'm not going to show you the one where I went 200 bucks. Again, acquisitions, shopping centers, the IKEA, right out Sawgrass, just a variety of projects. Today we're trying to stay focused on retail. We think the way to stay in business is do right and do it with your partners. And if you do a deal with somebody, do they want to do it again with you? And do they want to do it again after that? And we value our partners tremendously. One of the things you'll see in this list, these are our largest partners, financial partners, investors in our development deals. We put together a project, we then go raise the equity. We sometimes put in our own equity, and I'll show you how we structure our typical deals. But for the most part, our investors are looking for their returns on their equity. These are typical equity guys. WLD Enterprises has done 34 projects with us. Halbos Holdings, 15 projects with another 5 right now with them. Hudson Capital Group is in holdings, probably not him. And Guggenheim, which is a larger institutional guys, and BDX Capital, just getting going with those guys. And then some of our other partners with Cargill, Shorenstein, Prudential, Boston, Publix. If you want them to be a customer, you can treat it right. And for that, you get rewarded with 30 years of development opportunities. We're not talking about that because there is a reward for that in the development business when you develop those kind of relationships. So these guys, and I heard when I came in, you're going over the exam, talking about equity versus debt. Our equity guys expect a return up here, our debt costs are down here. So obviously we want to leverage as much as we can. If I can borrow money at 3.5% today, and my equity guys want 8% preferred return, I'd rather borrow the cheaper, but on the other hand, I don't want to leverage the project up so high that something doesn't go right up dead. Right? In fact, we've gotten to a point where we're getting more and more conservative. A public shopping center, we can leverage that to 95%. I mean, we've done 100% leverage on public shopping centers because there's so little risk when there's Publix at 10,000 feet. But our typical project, we're trying to really keep it at 75%. But when we think that there's some reason to move it up to 80, 85 on the retail, when Publix represents 70% of your NOI of the total rent roll that you're going to have, you feel a little more comfortable taking on more debt. If you're doing a shopping center with no anchors or marginal anchors, like the one we're doing with Hobby Lobby and Academy Sports, you know, it's like, you know, I'm feeling a lot better at 65% leverage on that. You got to give yourself some room, and that's what happened with the crashes. These guys leveraged up to 85, 95, 100%. Then all of a sudden they lost 25% of their tenants that are NOI went the wrong way. All of a sudden they're negative cash flow. They walk away from their debt payments to the property. It's not a good way to do business. So anyway, that's a little story about that. Same thing, have good partners and make them trust you and pay your bills. That's a real good thing in the development business, especially with your lenders. Our lenders up on the top. We've done financing deals with all of those guys. I would tell you that Wells Fargo is absolutely our best lender right now. Probably doing about 75, 85% of our loans. And we get terms from them that I just don't think most people in the marketplace can get. But it's a crazy idea. You borrow the money, you pay it back, you borrow it, you pay it back. As far as clients, we've been building for these guys over and over again. Great relationships. Eldorado Furniture is a good example. I think we've done 13 of them. City Furniture. We build virtually every city furniture in Florida for those guys, for that family. Car dealerships, believe it or not, our construction design group, we do design build auto dealerships. I didn't even know this until I went to a meeting the other day. We're on our 67th car dealership. And these are the guys, and the reason we do those is they're all building parking garages with all their dealerships. And our construction guys are really good with big, tall things. We don't use them all the time for our shopping centers, but our car dealers are all on the garages. So it's just an interesting niche market for us. So, and Publix, there's the count, I'm 37. Why Florida? Why are we here? It's not just because we live here, it's because I'd rather be developing in Florida than I'd rather be developing in Cleveland or Wisconsin or Minneapolis or I can name 45 states I'd rather not be developing in, probably 5 that I would. So what the heck, we have to be it's in the top 5. Florida, great place. It's been great for our business. And really, real estate development is about growth, the need for more retail, better retail, changing retail, as well as other components we'll talk about. But population growth is just as strong as can be. Broader Lines just came out with new numbers in South Florida rate. Florida is back up to 120 people a day, net new, which is a big difference than it was 2008, 2009, there was net losses in population. And it's just accelerating. And what that doesn't tell you is that probably 70% are coming to South Florida. Used to be retirees, big population. That just doesn't seem to be the case. Cost of living has gotten here pretty high. It used to be a great place. You could move to Century Village, buy a condo for $40,000, get your tax exemption for homestead. You could live pretty cheaply. I don't know how many of you guys are renting apartments locally. Rents are coming up to $2 a foot right now on apartments. So it's getting pricey, but I think the population is going to continue to grow. And I've said it before, it's as simple as it doesn't snow here. It really, if you go to live in Chicago for a couple of years, you'll see how Florida looks to you. It's just that constant flow of people. Top ports, Latin international banking, Latin business, the influence of South America, I don't need to get into it, you guys know. Great beaches. As far as development, one of the things we're going to talk about real briefly and get off to Florida is, besides being in Florida, we talked about relationships in real estate development, and you want to develop those relationships. If you are in the retail development business, you work for retailers. It's as simple as that. If I want to build an office building, all I got to do is go find a piece of land, build it, and put up a sign and say, it's in a good location, it's near interstate, you'll love it. With retail, it is so site specific. It is down to not only what city are you building in, it's what part of the city are you building in, what neighborhood are you building in, what intersection are you building in, and what side of the street of that intersection you're building on. It comes down to that specific. You will hear with retailers, I need to be on the coming home side of that street, grocery guys, okay? It's that important. They will pass on a site if it's not on that side. If the interstate's here and people are going home that way, they want to be on that so they can make a right turn in, not make a left turn in. That's how site specific this gets. So it is very hard. They have concentric rings, they analyze markets. Where should I have my next store? Should I be moving the store over here? And you need to be talking to them all the time. If you aren't talking to these retailers, if you think you're just going to get up a site and call a bunch of retailers, they have a great site, you're going to be a very hungry real estate developer. In fact, we have a guy, Ryan Carlin, who works with Justin, who does nothing but anchor relationships. That's his whole job is to do our anchor leasing. He does nothing but talk to national tenants daily, weekly, showing them our sites, getting them out, going up and meeting with them, finding out where their needs are. It's a full-time job. And because of that, with our relationship with Publix called us, about 4 years ago, I guess it was, 4.5 years ago. And they had made a decision to expand in North Carolina. And it was all top secret. No one even knew. They asked 3 developers to go to North Carolina for them and get them started. And we were invited to be one of those 3. Again, that has to go back with relationship. It was, at the time, sort of winning the lottery. You got Publix telling us we want to put 100 stores in the initial phasing of North Carolina, which sounded real good to us. And, ultimately, we went up there, we signed the most onerous confidentiality agreements you've ever seen. I mean, normally they have these non-disclosure agreements. This one basically said if anyone ever found out about it, you would never develop for Publix ever again, period. So we formed a shell corporation out of Delaware. We had business cards that didn't have our company's name on it. We formed basically separate companies through Delaware filings, because in Delaware you can't really find out who the real owners are, and you have agents. So we formed up a company, it was HP Investments, was the name of our company.
Oh, what, real estate investments? HP Investments?
HP Investments. Yeah, it was Honey Badger. You ever seen Honey Badger? They're nasty animals. They're great. So at Publix's request, we went up and they basically assigned us Charlotte. And they have developers working in some of the suburbs. We worked on Charlotte, and it worked. It's been working great. We built their first store for them, Valentine in South Charlotte, great neighborhood. I'll show you some examples of that, which is right here. Very simple stuff, but unbelievably difficult real estate transactions in that area. There's not a lot of land. And you'll see some of our deals. Now, this isn't going out in the cow fields. So this was the first Publix in North Carolina. This was the second Publix in North Carolina. This was the third Publix in North Carolina. This one's going to be interesting as hell. And then now we're expanded into Raleigh. We just closed on a piece of land in Cary in Raleigh with Publix and our partner. Publix has been our joint venture partner, by the way, on every one of these deals. So they are putting up their share of the equity, their share of the debt, they're our partners, which gives you some confidence that you're pretty sure you're open for business. And you can also get really good local agreements. So we said, we'd love to go. We went, we have an office up there now. We have a head of the office, a deal guy, 2 development managers full-time, and then we just expanded into Raleigh. In fact, we were breaking ground in about 4 months on our first apartment deal in Raleigh, right down the street from where we're going to be building a Publix in Raleigh as well. Because of that relationship with Publix, and that's the key to retail, is relationships. I'm going to say 100 times today. You get to reap the rewards of a good relationship. There's guys who, you'll see examples in 2007, 2008, where they were building for Publix. Things went bad, and they just walked away and left Publix hanging. They had signs Yeah, North Carolina, why is it good for retail development? Look at those statistics from 2006 to 9 between Fort Lauderdale and Charlotte. Look at the total new jobs that were created here versus Fort Lauderdale, MSA. 32% change in population, 7.7%. So if you're down here developing and you're looking up there, you know, it seems like a pretty good place. Incomes are high, jobs, they're getting white collar jobs. I mean, they're getting great companies out there that are aggressive as heck. But check out that little statistic about Charlotte. Yeah, jobs. It's all about jobs. What did we see in North Carolina? We saw Fortune 500 companies headquartered there. 9 of them here, 1 of them here. 4 1,000 companies, 3 here. Half the population, double the number of headquarters. Incomes, average incomes for workers is about 40%, 30%. So we said, yep, that's where we're going to plant our flag for the next 10 to 20 years, and we're now in our 5th year of it. So a little bit of retail world in North Carolina. And the reason I give you these examples is because, you know, it isn't just building out, you know, in front of a bunch of houses. It's finding very complicated sites. You know, it always seems, you know, the retailer, you have a retailer and you can't find a site, or you have a site and you can't find a retailer. In North Carolina, we had the retailer, just getting the sites was unbelievably difficult, especially when you're building an urban environment. The Shops at Southline was just a complicated project. I'll give you how hard it was. This was all industrial, southwest side of Charlotte. As you can see, not a lot of vacant land. These pictures are slightly old because this is now all apartments, all apartments, all apartments, all apartments. Brand new apartments. We just tried to buy that building. Lowe's wanted a store here because of the base of Charlotte. Lowe's, the home improvement store. That's the parking deck on top of Lowe's. They actually had to do a parking garage. And the city said, we don't want a Lowe's, even though you're headquartered here. And we'll talk about government. And forced them to build townhouses, wrapping their Lowe's. And these are 22 feet deep townhouses, just so they could get the liner where they needed it for the city. So we bought these buildings right here. This is an old paint, I don't want to call it a factory. Paint would come in with giant trucks. It would be put into the cans, and then it would be shipped out. Tad environmental problem. So we bought this, knew we had an environmental issue. This is, you guys talked about brownfield development yet? Brownfield development is slightly contaminated sites, and there's tax benefits for taking slightly contaminated sites, not deeply contaminated sites, and this is one of them. So the EPA came and said, look, that's a brownfield designation. This is what you have to do to be able to develop on it, which we said fine. We will do that. It wasn't a lot of money. It was about $400,000 to clean up. You can't bring water out of the ground and use it for irrigation. And you'll see when you see the site, not a lot of landscaping to worry about here because we built a lot of concrete. But the benefit from the city to do all this brownfield development, your first year you have 0 real estate taxes. Your second year you only pay 20, then you pay 40, 60, 80, and by your 5th year you're up to your 100%. The real estate taxes on this project are $480,000 a year, so it's about a $2 million. About $1.6 million of savings in real estate taxes. We don't have to pay, but we get the benefit of. So that was their incentive to develop it. And here's one for the next one. This was just some conceptual computer drawings trying to figure out how to get this thing to fit on this little site. Ultimately, what we build, the site drops down really deep into the back. This is street level, front door, but the site drops really deep. So this is the first time we've ever done it. It's the first time Publix ever did it. We built the building in steel. And it's basically a Publix with a wedge of parking underneath and a second wedge of parking underneath. So it's 2 levels of underground parking built on steel. And then we built a steel platform and then built a concrete building on top of the steel. So you actually have a suburban Publix built on top of an urban steel structure. There were some questions about what that does to floors and cracking and things like that, but it's worked out great. So that was just some initial concepts and try out. jam it in. And here we are 2 years later, that vacant piece of land. This is Camden Apartments with 375 apartments. This is the roof of the Publix. This is our retail. This is a complicated loading system all the way in the back. The train line that runs into downtown. Right here, train stop there, new train stop comes right behind us. All new apartments, and then a very convoluted entrance system that we shared with Camden Apartments. And the store's just doing phenomenal. Average Publix, that's about $580 a foot in sales. This one's doing $850 a foot in sales. It's a great store, Publix partner. This is just other views of it. You can see, you really can't see it that well here. At the front level, when you drive by, it just looks like one level of retail. Get in the back, the thing is 3.5 stories tall. And that's just some of the views. Really, the entrance was irrelevant on street level because everybody's going into the garage and coming with the elevators to get into the thing. Street view again. This is what you see at street level. It's a great, it just looks like a regular shopping center, but it drops off pretty dramatically. Publix's entrance is pretty big. Second store out there, again, the wonders of government. Remember, this is Intil, which is our number 2, the second one we did in Charlotte. I won't bore you with a lot of it, but you know, here you are building now. This really isn't the cow fields. I mean, this is Mid-City, the town of Midhill, which is southeast of Charlotte. This was a vacant piece of land. We had to buy 40-something acres, which we still own all this land back in here. We're trying to get a home builder to buy it. But here you are out in the suburban market, and we've got urban planners in this little town telling us to move the stores right up onto the street. We want park. We had to actually build pavilions and parks and benches and concrete walkways, all this other stuff. Publix has had to have a pharmacy, so we had to build a retail building that's shielded. This is actually, looks like a retail store. It's actually a drive-through for Publix pharmacy. It's open, doing great. Final product, it's less than 6 months old. Right across the street from the Kroger Shopping Center, but you can see behind us, it's not exactly downtown. There you go. Very traditional Charlotte shopping center, architecturally pre-planned. Which one was this? Valentine's. This is the first one we did. Again, just execution. We talk about execution, retail development, and any kind of development. It looks pretty basic. Giant Publix, which they wanted their first store to be this monster store for reasons we didn't understand, but like argue. But this storm detention area and this, what it doesn't show you, maybe it'll show you pictures. Can you do the photo? Yeah, that's the photo. Does it have the area? No, let's just go back a second. The challenge, I'm sure Jessica would have enjoyed building this one. 28-foot retaining wall. This wall is 28 foot had to be built to hold our site up. If you fall off that, it's going to hurt. Stormwater detention is all structured, so it's basically walls, walls, walls. Everything goes down into it, and we have to deal with homes right here. So if you live in these homes right here, you're staring up at basically the bottom of the Publix, not even the top. It was fun. But it looks great. More retail. This is another one we're doing in Charlotte. This is a great example of when you have relationships in retail development. Publix, we've been showing them a site really downtown. There was no sites. Of course, we want a store here. You can't have a store here. There's not a vacant piece of land anywhere there. We were a little more creative than they were. We bought a 60,000-foot office building. We're currently demolishing it. We got all the tenants out of the building. We bought them out of their leases. No one saw that one coming. And this will be a Publix with 2 levels of structured parking. And we have the site plan. No, we don't. This is a corner-to-corner site. There is no landscaping, 0. It's as urban as it gets. We're tucked in between Bank of America and Chick-fil-A. But again, it took us 2 years to get this building, to get this office building, get the tenants moved out. And then you're always waiting for that magic last tenant who doesn't want to go. You know, it always happens. Raleigh, getting ready to build new apartments. That's all I'll say about it since we're talking about retail. Florida developments, we're just going to fly through these, so we can keep them here. This is something we're going to be doing in Coral Gables. We've been working on this for maybe 7 years. Could you go back?
Yeah.
This is the rendering of what it's going to look like. There's a Publix right on Lejeune, right across from City Hall in Coral Gables. We're going to be tearing down that store. We're going to be building them a new 58,000-foot store, 900-car parking garage. And the reason it needs 900 cars is we're building 260 apartments on the balance of the site, and out of those 900, 600 belong to us. So we're sharing it, building a mixed-use project. They will not be a partner in our apartments. We won't be a project partner in the Publix. It's sort of separate but equal. But we're basically taking what now is just a 38,000-foot Publix, and we're going to be building, which is 38,000. And with their store, not including the square footage of the garage, will be at 395,000 square feet. So that's pretty good density improvement. That was the one down in Coral. This came in 18th that we talked to you about. That used to be the condo site. You know, go back to that just for 1 second. The thing that's interesting. The thing that's interesting about that is it looks like a rendering, sort of. It looks like a cartoon on the roof. That is the roof. That's a photograph. We told Publix they wanted a environmentally, they wanted a white roof for energy savings. We're going, you don't need it on the top level of the parking garage. There's nothing to insulate against below this parking. And by the way, we have somewhere to the tune of, I think there's about 3,800 condo guys, units within 500 feet of us, so you don't need this much parking. Like in Florida. The reason those spaces are still white is because nobody parks in them. They walk here. Seriously, it's going to be that white for years and years. And now we'll just keep flying. That's the street level of it. What a coincidence they also financed that. We built for Target here. That's here.
Could I just back you up actually to that garage again?
Yeah.
In Publix? So if you can just tell us, how many square feet is the Publix in Wells Fargo? How much is the development?
The Publix, okay, the Publix is 50,800, give or take. The retail, which is Liner Retail, which is just here, Publix liquor store, Wells Fargo took the corner, and then we built Liner Retail, just 3 shops. And so we ended up with about 9,000 feet of shops, 50,000-foot Publix, all garage. This, you come in the ramp here, you pop up over there, and then you can see the other level underneath. There's level 1 down here, level 2 up there.
So how many parking spaces are there?
It's 5 per 1,000, which is ridiculous.
Ridiculous.
It just really is. It should have been about 2.5 to 3 per 1,000.
So we've got 300 spaces and nobody ever parked on top of level, and I finally realized that is a single car right there.
Yeah, and the sad part about that is they now admitted that we're right, you know, shocking. But the rent was based on the cost, and you know, there's basically, let's call it 75 spaces too many at 30,000 a space. So we spent $2.1 million for parking spaces that are, make a nice helicopter pad. And that's really the challenge with retailers, is getting them out of the security mentality where they always want 5 per 1,000, right? 5 spaces for 1,000 square feet of square footage. And in urban environments, you just can't fit it. And we're working in certain cities now. What was the last one we just did? In Orlando. Justin's working on a project there where they have a reverse. They have a 3 per 1,000 max. You can't build more than 3 per 1,000. They want you to force their people to use mass transit. Okay.
And does Publix have a prescribed formula for stores?
They are finally getting to a point on their urban stores after we've built a big chunk of their urban stuff for them. For some strange reason, we get the complicated brain damage deals for them. So we've done 3 or 4 really big urban deals for them, and we keep telling them, you don't need the parking, then they come back a year later and go, you're right. And we do it again, and they still don't believe us, and then we still build it again. Finally, they called when they went to the South Line store in Charlotte. We finally got a call from the president of the company who called me and goes, okay, I think we're getting it.
Now it's a matter of co-tenants, restaurants, stuff like that, they still want to push that issue.
Yeah, and yeah, I mean, if you want to put in restaurants, the bankers freak out and they do 10 per 1,000 parking for restaurant users. And it's like, guys, this is urban. You know, these people are walking into these places. Suburban, but we get it. We'll just keep going. This is the Greg Davey store. This is the one we bought out of foreclosure. It was half finished, as you can see, it was quite finished. Power Center in Boulevard Square, Pembroke Pines. More Publixes. But we talked about when things go well. You know, we're always proud of showing big slides for everything that goes well. This one, we'd normally zip through. We talked about, you know, getting caught at the end. You know, there's like musical chairs in 2007, 2006, 2007, at the wind-up of it, right before the recession, is did everyone get a chair? You know, and we had just finished this project. We were only going, God, this doesn't feel right to be building this project right now. Publix really wanted it. You know, they said, look, we'll be your partner on it. You know, we really want the store. So we built a Publix, about 22,000 feet of shops, and have 7 out parcels out front. This is between Hernando and Hernando County and what's it? Pasco. Yeah, Hernando and Pasco, right on the county line. In fact, the road's called County Line Road. Great magic thing. And we're like, gosh, we really should be doing this. Well, that picture looks wonderful. What that picture doesn't show you is out of the 22,000 feet, 18,000 still vacant. Out of our 7 out parcels, we have that many users. And that's why we're happy to have Publix as a partner on that, because we said, you know, we told you so. And right now, it's just, I think we're breaking even. We went back and got a tax abatement because of the appraisal. So it's breaking even.
So is there
but it was cash call.
Is there a rooftop formula that Publix uses that you can help share with us?
Well, yeah, and we broke it on this one because there was a big developer proposing to build 2,700 homes across the street, so this wasn't an accident. Just the market crashed and the 2,700 homes still have cows eating the grass across the street. And so the houses didn't show up. The old rule of thumb for grocery stores is 10,000 people per store. And it depends on what those 10,000 people are. You know, Whole Foods will tell you that they need 35,000 people per store. Publix will tell you they'd rather see average incomes about 40, 60,000, preferably 70,000. Whole Foods will tell you they want to see 70, 90,000. They look at college education. They look at its disposable income. Every retailer has their magic formula they look for. If you don't know what those are, you're not going to be in the retail development business. And we can talk about it later, but whether it's a Best Buy or it's Target or anybody, they have very specific, you know, objectives. And then they have the ones they publish on their homepage, and then they have the ones that tell them what to write. And if you need to know the unwritten ones as well. But anyway, still own it. Anybody wants to buy it, give us a call. Sell it cheap. Right here in Plantation, we bought that old shopping center right where Peters Road, where Kinko's McDonald's is. We just knew it was good real estate. We purchased it. It was rather unattractive. And then we bought the land next door, and then with Prudential, we built the apartments called One Plantation, 100% leased up. Prudential was our partner. They bought us out of it a year ago. At first we didn't like it, but then we saw the 4.1 cap rate and said, okay, we're on. We still retain ownership of the shopping center, but we renovated it, upgraded it, and we're probably just going to hold on to that shopping center just because of you guys all sit in traffic on University Drive.
So could you just share a little map, and of course everybody will keep secrets in here, right, folks? And so
yeah, you all signed the CAs before.
That's right, of course. And so the One Plantation, you built it at what return on cost? That's why I want to understand what your spread was when you sold it at that 4.1.
It was perfect timing, to be honest with you. We built that at a 7.15 development return and sold out our portion at like 4.15. That was a big spread.
Right, big spread, 300 basis points.
I mean, normally and we'll talk about it as we go through this, our goal, it used to be we wanted a 200-point spread on our deals. We have an investment review committee, our investors, we're looking for the spread between cap rate and development return, 200 spread. That was in the good old days. Now, 150 basis points is fine with us. If we, you know, that's our magical number. If it's got Publix in it, we've developed down to a 100-point spread. If, you know, even a 100-point spread in Dade County on apartments is plenty. You know, it just depends. 100 points in Pasco County is pretty bad. 100 points in Dade County, when you're priced per pound, you know, when you're selling an apartment per unit, selling for $400,000 per unit, and it only costs you $270 to build it, so $270,000 per unit. That 100-point spread's feeling pretty good. So it's just and we're going to talk about it. We have a different terminology. I know you're learning about IRRs and development returns and cash on cash. We're going to teach you about a very important styles terminology that you probably haven't heard of. I'm going to write it up. I'll jump ahead. This is how we figure things out. Our investors all do their IRR calculations. We have finance guys all over the place. We have bankers. Everyone's doing all their stuff. When we sit in the investment review committee, pile of money. Very technical. Don't ever forget this. Because you can have all the returns in the world. You can look at what IRRs are. We have some investors who don't want to hear about IRR. They just want to know, if I give you $1 million toward that project, what am I getting back? What's my pile of money? And they're looking at equity.
not piles?
Piles. But they're really they're looking for equity multiples. You know, they want their double. That's the golden rule. Is I put $1 million, I want $2 million return to me. And trying to get to that 2 equity return, 2 multiple is really that's magical in today's world. It depends on the project, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. This was that shopping center implementation. Now we're just getting long, so we'll just fly through pictures. Hey, pretty apartments, good for you. This, I think some of you guys toured.
You guys went last month.
That's the rendering of it. It's magically through the world of marketing people who have no idea who they are. It's now being called MSRED. Don't even ask me. I don't know what it is. And you were in it. It's a phenomenal project.
Yeah.
Crossroads Residences. This was another good example of the old Kenny Rogers song, "No one to hold them, no one to fold them." We built that project in Plantation. We went over here and bought a piece of land from Duke. We were going to build an office building on it. Nobody was building office buildings. We said, we'd like to buy your office site. They thought we were nuts. They're office developers. They know we're office developers. And they didn't know what we had up our sleeve. We got it under contract. We just like a piece of land. What we really didn't tell them was we rezoned it for apartments. And spent a year in the city of Plantation getting it rezoned. And because we got what we think is potentially the last rezoning of Plantation for apartments, another group who builds apartments called Henley, you heard of these guys, came in and said, we want to buy your fully entitled site. We said, why would we do that? We're apartment developers. We don't sell to developers. They said, well, why if we paid you this per key, for your land? And it was, we do the quick math and then took a risk-adjusted return and sold it to them. It's financial engineering. It's how much was our return going to be? What was our risk we were going to take? We had lease-up risk, construction risk, timing risk, most importantly, rental rate risk, where apartment rates going to continue to rise above $2 a foot in Plantation. We are somewhat skeptical of that happening in this location. So just making good decisions. It's just, yeah, we're developers, but we're not dumb developers. So this was an old shopping center. This was our first apartment project in East Fort Lauderdale. It turned out to be spectacular. Just in case I didn't even understand this when we built it, but believe it or not, this marina made more money per month than those apartments did. The shortage of yacht space in Fort Lauderdale, it's astounding. Our first condo project right next to our office. This is actually the Bank of America building. This is our condo project we built. This was our headquarters for right around there. Not architecturally the best thing we've ever done. Nashville, with a partner up there, probably the most profitable project we've ever built in the history of the company. Right in the Gulch. I don't know if you guys know Nashville. The Gulch is right off of downtown. The best, coolest neighborhood. Bars, restaurants coming up, redevelopment area. Everyone wants to live there. Rents are going for $3 a foot, which are Austin type of rents. I mean, Austin and Nashville are now competing for those same people. We built this as a high-end renter by choice apartment. There's so many music people from Los Angeles that come to Nashville. We said, you know what? There's room for bigger apartments, more expensive apartments, not the typical, 25-year-old, 30-year-old. We want the guy in LA who jets back and forth. So we built the top 10 floors as mega-sized apartments, and so somebody could actually, instead of being a 1,000-foot apartment, could have a 2,200-foot apartment. But the rents were going to be $6,000 a month, but there was proven market for that. We got halfway through it, and people kept saying to us, man, I tell you, I'd like to own it. I don't want to rent it. Long story, I'll fast forward. We converted it to condo halfway through, changed all the interior finishes, upgraded everything. Because we accidentally built the top 10 floors guys were buying two of them and combining them, making 4,000 foot condos out of them. We had units in here that sold for $2 or $3 million. 283 units, 235 sold and closed already, and it's only 9 months old. The conversion from apartment to, you have to make some financial judgments on that. The risk is that if you don't sell them, you now have this huge debt service. This is almost $100 million building. You got an $80 million loan on this thing. You have your loan clicking away, but debt service, and you have no rental rent coming in. So you're gambling that you're going to have to carry this building for a year or two, but because of velocity. But it's just phenomenal. We're working to do another one, like in Nashville. Great place for retail as well. We're doing this downtown on the river with the Tribune. That building's going to get squared off. The architect, talk about execution. It's a beautiful building. It's really cool as hell. But when you price out the building, I'm sorry?
The architect is?
Kobe Carp.
Oh.
Down in Miami. Great looking building. It's copying the one in Chicago with the waves.
Right, the one that, what's
just
the
north
name
of the, south of the river.
Right.
Yeah, it's got a name which I don't remember.
Yeah.
But it's wonderful, and the balconies are the coolest things ever. It's just, it can't be built. It's just too expensive. It's too expensive. This will be apartments. And now we're just going to keep flipping through because we got to get onto our case study stuff. And big tall buildings, square buildings, semi-round buildings. I'm going to have Justin talk real quick about our acquisition side of our business because
I think you covered most of the strategy of the discussion. I mean, you did a great job hitting the points, I think. I mean,
why don't you talk because I'm working.
you can go to the case study right now.
No.
What I do.
I'd like you to talk about our investment strategy for the fund. Talk about the guys who are involved in it, what their backgrounds are, what kind of people are on our side of the team are involved.
That's not my area.
It used to be.
You're going to learn it very quickly, though.
No, it's great.
Talk about what our fund guys do.
I'm not certain.
You know Kyle, right?
I know Kyle, I know Bryson. They have a fund, and they buy commercial real estate.
Okay, you did that for Federal Realty.
Yes, I did.
Okay.
Yes, it's REE.
And you did shopping centers.
I did.
Okay.
Okay.
So why would I buy a shopping center in South Florida when cap rates are so low?
Well, if you come down to your cost of funds, today you're a REIT, you've got a very low cost of funds. Your investors are driving up the stock price, therefore your capital is cheap, and you can afford to pay those low cap rates with a spreads like this. So if your dividend yield is 4% and cap rates are 6, and the 200 basis point spread really gone.
Yep, I'm going to keep leading them into questions. So I'm in the development business, and you're in the, we're going to pretend for a minute, you're in the acquisition business for Federal Realty or one of our funds. And why are they so scared about development? What fears do they have that they say, I'd rather buy stuff and pay a premium versus build it from the ground up?
Well, I think the big fear, and it goes back to this whole 200 basis point spread conversation, which sounds nice to everyone, but it's unlikely you'll win a 200 basis point spread deal in this market. You know, people are going to shrink that pretty quickly. Because what happens is, more like, you go in too light, you get outpriced. But we say 200 basis points because we know it's going to get skinnied up. At the end of the day, excuse me, if you think cap rates are at 6% and you develop to an 8, there's 200 basis points there. You know, you miss your perform up, the rents go down, costs go up, and your spread gets eaten up by movable. Because when you start a deal, it's about like 18 months to finish. So there's a lot of risk associated with the project during that time period. If you buy a deal straight up, you know what you're getting, you know when you're getting it, and you know how to capitalize it. That's the difference.
Right. And what you'll see as we talk about real estate development for retail, whether it be retail office buildings or any of the other product types, just retail as well, is there's a lot of stuff that go on. There really can be. And you're working on it, let's say your project costs are $15 million. And all of a sudden you have surprise 1, surprise 2, and surprise 3. And maybe surprises you should have known about, you didn't do your due diligence well enough, or you're not good at what you do, or something happened that you just could never have predicted happens, and you have a $200,000 mistake, a $400,000 mistake, another $300,000 mistake. Your project cost went from $15 million to $16 million. Take your, let's call it $1 million NOI, right, divided by your project cost, so $15 million, all right, and look at your return. Now take that same $1 million NOI divided by $16 million, and you're going to see that there's quite a difference. which means your investors, you didn't tell the truth. Or it's like, oh, sorry, I know I promised you a return of this, but it's really going to be more like this. And that's why due diligence is so critical in what we do and being able to execute on this. So enough of the spiel about all the different kinds of things we do. Let's talk about Westlake Commons, right, which is our little case study we're going to share with you. Let me give you the background on this thing. And the instructor was quite accurate when we're not going to talk about these things outside the room. We are going to share with you very detailed information about this project, down to how much it cost us, how much we made, the mistakes we made, the things we did well, why it happened, and it's pretty interesting because this was another talk about relationships with anchor tenants. I got a phone call from my friends at Publix up in Lakeland, and they said, "Hey, we've got a problem with our store down in Dania, and it's the Dania store."
Well, it's.
Yeah, this is close enough. This was the site. The Publix is right there. Right here. A 44,000 foot store, 12 years into their lease, and Dania has this real flooding problem in heavy rains. They have an institutional landlord, who I won't mention, even though we know him. And they called the landlord up about 2 years ago, 3 years ago, and said, "Look, every time it rains, the water is physically going over the curbs into our store. You got to fix this." They didn't fix it. Call up again, call up again, call up again. And this is crazy because these are institutional owners. They understand owning real estate. This is what they do. They couldn't figure out how to fix this problem, or didn't choose to fix this problem. Publix is big boys. It's like, fine, we're leaving. And that's really what they said. We're not putting up with this anymore. They lost probably $200,000 of equipment and electrical problems on the last big rain. I mean, I have photos of it, just went right in the front door. So they called us up and said, "We got to get out of this store." You know, it's, even though we got 8 years left on the lease, it was a 20-year lease, 12 years into it. They were paying about, I think, $750 for rent. To move, it was going to cost a lot more rent, probably double than what they were currently paying. But when you're that size, you've got to have a good store, modern location, and you can't lose a week of business because your customers can't get out of their cars. So strangely, this big investment REIT didn't fix the problem. It just ignored it. And so they called us up and they said, "How close can we get to this?" We said, "Well, the only thing that you really can do is across the street is Hollywood Lincoln Mercury," which, by the way, was the oldest car dealership in Broward County, in South Florida, built in 1952. And Holman Automotive Group bought it. They were operating it. They had shut down Lincoln Mercury. They're just operating some parts of Ford there. And it was an old site, and we just picked up the phone and called our folks at Holman and said, "Hey, you know, it doesn't look like you're doing a lot with your site, and we'd be interested in selling us your car dealership." And long story short, 11 months, I think it took us from beginning to end to get it under contract with Holman. But they did agree to sell us the car dealership. So we basically, Publix calls us, need a new store close by, basically across the street. We go and buy a car dealership, which unto itself is a little bit of a challenge because, one, we're in a different city. That's the border between Dania and Hollywood. So we're moving the store out of Dania, moving it to Hollywood. The city of Dania loved that. And the city of Hollywood loved the idea of getting rid of this ragged old car dealership that's been there forever, had body shops on it. These people in the houses back here backed up to the body shop, which was really quiet. So that was the beginning. This was the beginning views of the project. You want to go back to the site line. And this is what we designed, trying to deal with the strange shape of the property. This is Federal Highway. That's Sheridan Street. Right. And Publix here, tucked in the corner. Retail, Publix drive-through. Retail shops, parking lot. You're going to hear about this. Cell tower right in the middle of the parking lot. Driveway cuts all along here. Houses here, houses here, houses here. A notch out into the neighborhood. That was fun. Burger King over here. And so it really was a magic act to get this all fit in here. But so Publix calls, we buy the dealership. We found a whole bunch of issues during due diligence. We called back Holman and said, "Hey, guys, there's some things missing here." And Jessica's going to go through all of them, including like their survey was wrong, and we were missing land that was on this plan. And their answer was tough: buy it or don't buy it. We don't really care. That was a great negotiation. negotiation, went really well. So with that, that's the intro to the site. What I'd like to do is have Jessica tell you about the project, tell you what she did, and I think really what's really important is the project challenges. We'll try to keep this down to 15 minutes of this, and I appreciate that. I'm going to let her walk you through, because if you're going to be in the development business, all those things I talked about that could come and bite you in the rear end, you know, $200,000, $300,000, $500,000 mistakes, we encountered all of them. But we managed them, and that was the key. But we did end up over budget. It's not something we like, but I think we ended up over budget.
We did.
Yes, we did. It's a lot of discussion. So with that, Jessica.
Okay, so thank you, and I think maybe perhaps a handful of you have heard about this project before, and thank you for those who haven't. So just to talk a little bit more about the site plan, and what Bob said is, you know, as far as the configuration was concerned, is another thing that was a challenge in laying everything out is that all of these openings were already existing. We didn't have to close or create any new openings, so we really had to design the site all around that. And you know, laying it out, it took a lot of you know, meetings with Publix and their real estate managers, and it also took a lot of meetings with the city of Hollywood, particularly their traffic engineering department, just to make sure that they were okay with the traffic flow and everything. And you know, we did use Styles Architecture to design the building. And even during the due diligence period, you know, we're working with architecture, we're laying that out, we're working with Ryan, you know, the leasing agent that he talked about at the time. He was still working with other tenants, and he was able to get a Starbucks for us and a Pollo Tropical. And it was very important for us to get those tenants solidified during the due diligence period, because we need to be able to show our lender that we had, you know, tenants that were committed to the project, and at the same time we had, you know, just a period, and it was only 60 days to complete our due diligence to know, hey, you know, we have enough tenants, we're confident we're going to be able to move forward. So during the due diligence period, we're doing that. We're also performing environmental testing. One of the challenges of this being a used car dealership is there was some very minimal environmental contamination on site. We did have to remove some hazardous materials. We did get a phase 1, which showed we needed to do some further investigation. And we did a phase 2, which found that the property was able to be developed for commercial uses.
Get your
Let me get to mine. Oh, excellent. So another thing that we found during the due diligence period is the site had an extensive amount of muck on it. So muck is it's an organic material that is not suitable for building on. It was all underneath the Publix pad in general, so we had to, you know, guarantee that, you know, obviously it would be structurally sound. So we had to remove the muck during the construction process, and it was at an additional cost of almost $700,000. And I don't want to say additional like outside of our budget, because, you know, early on we discovered it, so we were able to work that into the budget, but it also took a lot of time. It took us extra 3 weeks during construction, and just, you know, cost us a lot of money. Another thing that we thought was a little bit interesting during the due diligence period that we found with the survey is there was a portion on the southeast part of the site where we found this area that was crisscrossed of little pieces of right-of-way that was owned by the city of Hollywood that nobody really knew about. And it was something that, you know, during our you know, our title search, we discovered it, and we had to figure out a way to kind of get it vacated and for us to purchase the property and own it. So in order for us to do that, we had to go to the city of Hollywood. We had to go to, I think it was definitely we had to go to city commission, I think twice, and it took us about 4 months to get, you know, for them to tell us, hey, we don't need this property, we will relinquish ownership, we will give it to you guys. And for us, we were building 41 parking spaces over that area, and if we didn't, you know, get to own that property, then the deal wouldn't really work. So there's always things that go on during the development period where you're like, if this doesn't work out, the deal isn't going to work. And so, you know, you're always like trying to figure that out.
But you're just getting phone calls from the boss. You got it figured out, right?
Yes. You know, so also during this period, we are doing, oh yeah, I'm sorry, as far as the site constraints, like Bob referenced the cell phone tower, which, you know, that was a big thing for him. We had a cell phone tower in the middle of the site, and Publix did not like it. They said, this is an eyesore, you need to move it, do whatever you can to move this thing. It's right here. However, there's a city ordinance where any cell phone tower must be at least 400 feet from any residences. You see we have residences here, residences here. We tried, and also, I mean, it was a large cost also. So finally, we just said, hey, Publix, you know, if we kind of screen it, we put some landscaping around it, you know, some nice fencing. And I mean, it also generated revenue for us. Not a lot. I mean, we would prefer not to have it on site, but.
Well, yeah,
you know.
don't skip over that. That thing is on lease to the cell tower company, which, what was that?
I mean, it was, we got $6,000, I think, a month from it, so.
Yeah, but you do the math on that, that's $72,000. That's $72,000 a year for
Right.
a space that's 20 feet by 20 feet. You know, so you, right?
Yeah.
So we're getting $72,000 a year on 400 square feet of land. On I'd like to do more cell towers.
So,
I think that's great.
another thing that was unique about this site is the property, like he had said, it was purchased by the Holman, I think the Holman family in the 50s. And we had never, ever, ever been platted before or mapped by Broward County. Now, usually, like in a development site, you might run into where you have to do like a plat amendment or just add or change your use. But this one, we had to start the platting process from, from start to finish. It took about 9 months. And I think one of the biggest issues during the planning process is you go through a process with the county where they kind of look and they give you a report. It's called the development review report. They can tell you, are you complying with all of the future plans, land use plans with the county. And they look at the traffic, their long-term traffic plans. So they tell you if you need to dedicate any property along the side for, future traffic expansions. Well, they wanted us to dedicate along Sheridan Street 40 feet of right-of-way for their future, because they said by 2035 we're going to expand Sheridan Street to 6 lanes. Now, if we were to do that, that would have taken up we wouldn't have been able to have the out parcels, which, we needed that to make the deal work. So what we had to do is 2 things. There were 2 options. We either could do a traffic ways amendment plan or a traffic ways waiver of the requirement. So in order for us to explore all of our options, we pursued both at the same time. So we had to go to both the city of Hollywood and the city of Dania Beach and show them, look, it's very unlikely that you're gonna, expand this to 6 lanes in the next 20 or 30 years. And we had to show them all the different ways. We had to show them if they had to do that, they would have to take the houses across the street by eminent domain. We showed them that, as far as the traffic counts, that it's unlikely that they were going to use that for an evacuation route. We showed them on an intersection of the street that there's no way that they could expand that either. And that took us about another 4 or 5 months in the process. But we had to go to both cities. We had to go to the county commission. We had to go to the Broward Regional Planning Council. We ended up actually not getting the traffic ways amendment plan, but we did get the waiver. So instead of dedicating 40 feet along Sheridan, we only had to dedicate 7.5. We showed them that at least what we can do is to build a turn lane all along Sheridan Street in 7.5 feet. So we did that, but we still ended up having to build 4 lanes along Sheridan Street and then 1 on Federal Highway. And so again, that was kind of like it's very, the planning process is very slow moving, and it's a lot of weight. As far as with the government, when you submit for something, they say, oh, you get on the agenda in 6 weeks, and so it's a very, very long process.
Just for the benefit, you guys all know what platting is?
Yes.
Okay, never mind. Keep on.
Okay. Again, as far as entitlements are concerned, as far as getting the entitlements, we had to, when we built the turn lane along Federal Highway, we had to do some signalization work. So we had to, we didn't have to add one, but we had to relocate the existing traffic signal. So in order to do that, you have to get permits from FDOT. And it took us 10 months to get our permit from FDOT. And at that point we were already under construction, and we were getting very worried it was eating into our critical path of the store. We actually got the permit to do the signalization work a month before Publix was supposed to open. And we were scrambling just to get the work done at the last minute, and Publix was actually stocking their store as we were finishing that work on the intersection. And for those of you who've done signalization work before, it's very hard to find a reliable contractor. So even with those time constraints, every day the contractors like wouldn't show up, and we would have to call and say, where are you? And just beg him to come to the site and say like, look, this Publix is opening up. And it really was, especially for the contractors, it was a very, very stressful time for them.
Yeah, and by the way, again, just to keep interjecting a little comment, when we sign a lease with Publix, it says you will give us our store on this day. Right?
And you don't miss the date.
Missing your opening day is never acceptable.
Do you have a
These
penalty
guys-
clause in your contract?
Hmm?
Is there a penalty clause for that?
We have a force majeure clause that's so ridiculously restrictive that we can rarely ever use it. The bottom line is don't miss your date.
It like it
Period.
goes back to as far as the relationship thing, so then it would be harder for us to do stores with them in the future.
But keep in mind, they've now hired 150 employees. They've spent $3 million on the inside side of their store, and they've got about $2 million inventory coming in, refrigerated equipment, inventory. And then you call them up and go, hey, you don't mind waiting an extra month, do you?
Another quick challenge is that the city of Hollywood had a green building ordinance where any shopping center over 20,000 square feet was required to be LEED certified. It was very challenging for us because Publix is, they do a lot of sustainability elements, but it was because we had to build their entire store built out, but we're building shells for the inline space. It was really hard for us to kind of manage that because we couldn't do a full build out, we couldn't do core and shell. Long story short, we had to go to meetings with the Hollywood Green Advisory team and then get approval by the city commission. We got a waiver on that, but in order to get the waiver, we had to prove to them that we were doing 40 different sustainable elements in the shopping center, and I had to have I had a green binder in the building official's office, and once a month I had to go down and submit paperwork, which was signed off by all of my engineers. I had a lead consultant showing that the shopping center was very sustainable, and we had to go ahead and finally prove to them every single point that we were building a green shopping center. Lastly, again, the construction was a tight time frame. The Stiles Construction built it in 7.5 months. It was the shortest time period that they ever built the Publix, and it was a 54,000 square foot Publix, a larger one. And then the best one that we always like to laugh about, which is really why the project was over budget, is during construction when we were building the turn lanes along Sheridan Street, we ran into a 24-inch water main that was going along Sheridan Street where we were building our turn lanes.
Ran into it, such a nice turn.
Which was not located anywhere on the city's utility maps. We had no idea it was going to be there. We literally had to stop construction. Again, this was something on our critical path. It was very, very stressful times. We were worried about meeting this opening date. We had to go meet with the city and have emergency meetings with their city manager, with the utilities department, and say, what can we do? They were, I guess, somewhat cooperative, somewhat not, in the sense that they worked with us to find a solution, but we had to actually relocate 700 feet of this 24-inch water main out onto our property, out of where we're going to build the turn lanes. We had to do it when we shifted the water. We had to do it overnight. We had to stop the water for hours in the city of Hollywood. We had to get emergency health inspections, and it really was very challenging. And then when we tried to talk to the city about it, saying, this should have been on the maps, it should there, can you help us with some of the costs? And they just said, just like Holman, when we asked for price reduction on the land, they just said, well, good luck, go ahead, move forward.
Was there an easement before or after this discovery?
No, and we granted them an easement afterwards, a water
So there was an
easement.
easement after?
Mhm.
But that water line didn't show on anything. They didn't even know. I don't even know if they was there.
They were surprised too.
Did you guys go Sunshine D before you started?
Well, we did, but as far as the water line, well, one of the things about it, which makes it interesting, is that we knew that a water line was there, but we thought it was at a depth like maybe 5 feet lower than where it actually was. So it really was on the incorrect depth is where the problem was. But even when you call it Sunshine, it's something that large. We call it Sunshine all the way across. From
But
the
regardless, it was encroaching on your property, so that's why I have a problem understanding why there wasn't an easement.
There was not one, I can tell you that. It's very, the property was very old, and as far as the records, since it was owned by the same people in the 50s.
Chances are it was plotted, that would have been disclosed and
For instance, yeah, it's because the records on the property were very old. There wasn't a lot, as far as known in the county and with the city of Hollywood, because it hadn't changed ownership since the 1950s, since they had all those records.
Yeah. So other than that, it went smoothly. But one of the reasons I asked Jessica to go through this stuff, maybe a little more in depth than they really thought we would do, is this happens on every project we do, in different scale, different size, and these are the things, this list I have here, it was rounding up to almost $1 million, and it was just time, it was money, but if you heard some real critical redundancy, government, government plating, government water, government REE certifications, government environmental, government has easements that were in wrong, incorrect places, government had water. We deal with government unbelievably over and over again every day we do it. So, you know, if you're in the development business, you better be ready to work with government and have people that know how to deal with it. And you can go down there and yell and scream and kick it all you want, but the more you do that, the less you're going to get. So there's this balancing act of, I need this, but I'm sort of asking, but I'm sort of not. So you need to build these relationships in the municipalities and the governments you work with. In Charlotte, it's a whole different ballgame. Up there, they are so pro-development. We got that big South Line Publix where we took a brownfield contaminated site, right, and we needed lane change stuff by the city. We needed a whole new change in the road, and we needed building and site plan approval. 60 days, done, finished. 60 days. Had full site plan approval. Never goes to the city commission. All done by staff. All done under a master plan.
Whereas here it took 4 months to get the site plan approval, and it took 2 public hearings.
Right, but you also heard 4 months to do this, it took 9 months to get a plat. So it's just complicated stuff. You really, if you're going to be the developer, all right, you need to be aware of all these things because every one of them can sink your deal pretty quickly, or you better be sure you have really smart people who know how to deal with this stuff every day. So this is just the tip of, you know, Jessica's life for 18 months, but she did a great job.
Yeah, I worked on this since February 2012 until, actually all the way until we just sold the property in May of this year, so.
It was the first time she worked on a public center. Jessica's currently doing a fresh market shopping center for us in Fort Lauderdale. Just got entitlement for a rooms to build in Fort Lauderdale, and getting ready for her next project, which I have to be told which one it is. Because I'm not sure we know yet. So with that, if you have any questions, I think really just for the sake of time, if you want to hold the question, we can answer it now, but it's up to you. Justin's going to walk you through the money side of this deal, what we projected, what the budgets were, all the financial side of it, and pretty pictures of afterwards.
Yeah, this is the after.
So basically, that's our great marketing department coming in the graphic. So how did we do the shopping center? What did it cost us? How did we finance it? How much equity did we put out? Who were our partners? What kind of returns were they looking for? What debt did we get as far as the rates? So really, because of the Publix, we did go into an 85-15 deal. It was not our intent to go 85-15. Really, our intent was to go about 75-25 against debt and equity. But what happened was costs just kept rising on the project. And as costs were rising, our returns were going lower. And we said, Publix really represents such a large number of the NOI. I would not have done that with other tenants. In fact, I would never do this with anyone probably other than Publix from a debt standpoint. So we increased our debt, brought our returns back up because, again, my equity partners are expecting at least an 8% return on preferred return, and they're looking for a double on their equity, which typically means the projects have to return a 20 to 24% return. So as you can imagine, debt is a lot cheaper than equity. So with that, Justin is going to walk you through, because he has an amazing financial background, better than mine, to walk you through. And Jessica will pipe in. Okay. Please do.
When all is said and done, the total project cost, as it says, was $31.5 million. It shows additional project costs of $980,000.
What was that $1 million of, oh, by the way, we talked about?
Okay. For a total project cost of 32.5, say something.
Oh, go ahead.
Okay. 85% leverage, as Bob said, which is 27.4. So our equity was $5 million roughly. NOI was $2.2 million. So it says return cash on cash. I call it development yield was 7%. As we said before, if you're looking for a 200 basis point spread, a 7% development return would require 5% exit cap. So So over a 28-month period, you know, you sort of hold your breath that it happens. But they got close.
By
One
accident.
thing I wanted to chime in is when we talk about the 15% equity, back early on when Bob was showing you, you know, who our partners are and, you know, had a list of all those, the top 2 people on that list were our 2 partners on this project.
As I said, the blended exit cap is
I'm
roughly.
sorry.
What?
I don't know if it's even on our thing. Let me just point out our deal structure on this deal. And again, we're all friends, we're not going to talk about it outside the room. But on this deal structure, we were 60-40 with our equity. The equity put up 60% of the required. They put up, it was a 60-40 deal. They put 100% of the equity. All right, we put up the debt. All right, and so the $5 million you saw, our partners put up the $5 million. We didn't put up any. I don't know if we had a small co-invest on this deal. Lots of times we put up 10% of the equity, but on this one I don't think we did. And in return for that, we get 40% of the deal. To get our 40% of that deal, we have to sign personally on the construction loans. We do guarantees on the debt. We provide the debt. Cash equity partners do not. So there's no recourse, personal recourse for our investors. They just write the check. If anything goes wrong, it's our problem. We have to write the checks ourselves. So we pay close attention to that. So this was a 60-40 deal, 100% equity there. We got a 40% promoted interest, which is not much different. It's carried interest, promoted interest. So when you look at these numbers, that's, you can do the 60-40 math in your head. So I don't know if it was even in our analysis. So I'm sorry.
It's not here. It didn't exist.
Now it exists.
Yeah, so, okay. So your blended exit's 5.55%, and as a blend between the actual main center and the outparcels. The outparcels, you know, would command a lower cap rate given the longer term, better credit, et cetera, et cetera. So the total price of the center on the sale was $39.7 million. Cost of sale at 2%, which is roughly $100,000. And you net $38.9 million. If you take out project cost, your profit on sale is $7.4 million. If you add up the cash flow, you're about 7.8, and that's what Bob was talking about, that double. This is more than double. So our initial equity is $5 million, and we are getting close to 8 out, and that's a great deal. Bob also referenced the preferred return, which is $916,000. That comes off the top first, and then they take the pref. Excuse me, then they take the promote. Apologize. Which leaves you this amount to distribute. You take off the 40%, and then you should be balanced. 40% goes to Styles Development for guaranteed loan. Return on equity is 136%. The total return annualized, we said it's 20-some odd months.
28 months.
28 months. Was 58%, and the deal level IRR is 51.36%.
And so what was your original target?
That's a very good question.
That's a great question. It wasn't that.
Sure.
Like I said, this was one of those deals where we weren't sure we were going to do it because a 7% development return was getting really too thin for us. We really thought the exit cap was going to be a blended 6.5
Yes.
between the out parcels and the rest of the shopping center. We rejected 6.52. We were at a 50 basis point spread in this deal, and it was just one of these. Publix wanted us to do it for them. It was a relationship deal. If it wasn't Publix, we would never have done the deal. But they needed help. We said we'd do it. Now, don't forget along the way, because of the way we're structured, when we charge a development fee to the project, all right, the development fee of this project is about $750,000, give or take.
It was $618,000.
And
We
that's
charge
baked into
$5.
your 32.
Huh?
That's baked into your 32 minutes.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's included.
So we're getting a development fee. We were the architects. We were the construction company. We were the property management company. We were the leasing company. So when you add up all the fees, it added up to about $1.6 million in fees. So if we were just a small little, development guys, it was the three of us, and we didn't have 200 people back in the office, we would have hired architects, we would have hired construction companies. All that money was going out, the fees were going out the door to other people. So there was some benefit to having them. Along with that, the downside is we have all the overhead sitting around going, where's my next project? Because we're getting paychecks whether you have projects or you don't have projects. So ultimately, I share that with you, that to your point, it was very, very thin at the time. We got rescued by cap rate.
And then an interesting story about how the property sold is we actually got an unsolicited call in our leasing office one day. There was a South American shopping center investor who actually had just sold another property and was trying to do,
1031?
Yeah, a 1031 exchange, had 45 days to buy a new property, and then offered us just an outrageous price for it. And then, it was decided we were gonna go sell. However, Publix actually had a right of first refusal on it, on the property, and that was something that was in the lease, and so we offered it to them, and then it was also very stressful, 2 or 3 weeks, because we're waiting to hear from them. They're getting, sending to the real estate investment committee, they're doing their due diligence. As far as the first guy who made the offer was very kind of on the edge of his seat also, and then, Publix decided to go ahead and purchase the property, and we sold
Has
it to them.
Publix ever purchased any of the deals that you work in, or they really prefer the lease position?
Public signs a lease, and even the projects that they're partners on, they sign a lease, an arm's length lease.
Okay.
When they buy projects these days, the money really isn't Publix, the corporation's Publix pension fund. They're sitting on, at last count, their wing number is $7.2 billion of cash. And they're trying to get that out the door by buying everything they can possibly buy that they're attendant of. There's a whole class we can talk about how that is the most remarkable investment strategy on the planet, because they can be sitting in a shopping center with 3 years left on their lease. The cap rate value of the property is maybe an 8 cap. They basically sign the lease with themselves for a new 20 years, and the cap rate drops to 6. They sell it.
And they've captured it all.
And they captured it all. It's amazing. They're not dumb guys. So anyway, I'll let you continue, but we got lucky. South American money. We offered it to Publix. Just so you know, I think I was done, right? The interesting part of this story was Publix already has a first right of refusal, so we have a great relationship. We pick up the phone. I call Woody Rayburn, who's the head of asset management for the pension fund. He's the guy who signs the deals when they buy it. And I said, look, we got this guy. You don't even believe it, but hey, here it is. You just want to go ahead and buy it now and not go through the process. We want you to sign our contract with the guy, and we won't have to pay commissions and fees and all this other stuff. And they go, no, he's not going to perform the closing that number. I think he is. So he does. He puts up a contract, puts up a huge deposit. We then call Publix and say, okay, first right of refusal, here it was. They ended up paying $400,000 more than they needed to, because they didn't think the guy would really pay that low of a cap rate. But he did. He would have. He was ready to close. So Publix ended up executing at that guy's number. And honestly, when you talk about cap rates in shopping centers, and I'll pass this to Justin because he's probably better. It's about location. This is a East Broward infill site. No vacant land anywhere else. The odds of a new shopping center or a new grocery store coming within miles of us is nil, unless somebody's going to start assembling little houses and little buildings, which I guess they could do. But if we pick up that shopping center that just sold for a 5.5, which is still remarkable. I love saying that out loud, 5.5. And I pick it up and I move it to Tampa, right? And I drop it in Pasco County. What's that cap rate of that same site? What do you think?
Dollars vacant out
No.
it's probably 50 basis points, 125 basis points spread. Maybe.
Yeah.
50 to 100. So
Right. So that 5.5 is probably closer to a 6.5. Do the math on 100 basis point spread on those numbers, it would be about $2 million.
So folks, that's about $2.5 to $3 million, depending on how you slice it right there. And
Yeah.
That's a huge amount of profit.
Right.
It's a 50 bip spread over our
Yeah, and those are the balancing acts we deal with every single day. Is we know that if we can build urban infill, complicated deals with barriers to entry for our competitors, that we're going to be rewarded much higher with a much better cap rate. The problem is they're so much harder. They're so much more complicated. Our average deal from the day we think about it, oh, here's a piece we'd like to do. And we went back and did almost 10 years. It averages 34 months. From the day we say, let's work on this project, to the day we complete it, it's 34 months. A lot of things can happen in 34 months, especially when you think of interest rates, what the Fed Reserve might do. If interest rates, what was our loan rate on this thing? It was ridiculous.
5.5.
Oh, yeah, we got killed. We just did a new construction loan at 3, which one we did? Cotswold, we did at 3.35 on a construction loan, 3.35. You start moving those rates up to 6%, 7%, all all of a sudden these rates, these deals start changing. Construction costs have risen dramatically. That apartment building you saw that we just did here in Plantation, the one right at University and 595. That same that building costs us about $180 a foot. That same building is, we just priced it for a little project, it's now running $240 a foot, right? $60 a foot on 400,000 square feet. Like $24 million difference, right? Yeah. Construction costs in South Florida are killing deals right now. Deals are stopping right now. You hear about all these condo projects in Dade County, they're stopping. I mean, there's numerous guys who pulled the plug on their condo deals because costs have just risen dramatically. So in 34 months, you may have this brilliant idea, interest rates can move, construction rates can move, government can surprise you with all different kinds of surprises. So those are the development risks versus acquiring, where you go in and it's done, you don't have to do anything of that stuff.
That's why you need that spread.
Huh?
That's why you need that spread.
That's why you need the reward. You need that kind of reward for the kind of risk that go along with it. There's a lot of guys who lose a lot of money in real estate development. It doesn't take more than a couple bad deals to sink a company. So we went way over on the time. So what would you like us to do? We can answer questions or just get out of time?
No, let's do a few
Just do a
questions.
few more questions,
Yeah.
that'd be fine. And, go ahead.
Yeah, I noticed that your partners did not list Rockefeller, who was doing the deal with you. Is there some story behind that?
The only story is that they own the property. And they needed a local development partner. Their development guy out of Atlanta used to work for us. We have a great relationship with those guys. Very complicated guys to deal with. Rockefeller Development was spun off by the Rockefeller family years and years ago. It's actually in Mitsubishi, Japan. So every time we have a major decision for the partnership, it has to be in hand for them to sign off. It's like having another government. But it's not that they're great guys. We love dealing with them. But it was a site specific. It wasn't it's not like we're going to go out and do 10 or 15 more deals. They're very competent developers. They do a lot of industrial.
Thank you.
Yeah, I was looking at, you mentioned about the risk involving different developments, and I was thinking back at the chart organization. I think you're so vertically integrated that you reduce, laterally integrated too, that you reduce your risk significantly. Wouldn't you say that's a part of your
We
strategy?
talked ourselves into that. We like to think that our own people are more prudent in making decisions because their paycheck is coming from the same guy who's developing the shopping center or the office building or the apartment building. That loyalty factor.
Yeah, I mean, I can add to that. It's hard when you're managing a project like this, and the people whose money you're managing are literally one floor above you, and you see them in the hallway, and they say, "What's going on with this? What's going on with that?" Where it's I would think I haven't worked for, but it's a different mentality than if you're working for like a publicly traded company. It's a different stress level.
Yeah, and a good example is the construction group. There is a reason why we like them. We joke about them. The service companies are over here. Our real estate investments are over here. The companies, two separate entities, effectively. The real estate investment group, which is developers, equity investors, then the service companies. And the service companies are hired by the partnerships to build this stuff. So we try to keep it arm's length. And we always joke, about Styles Construction. Nobody hears from Styles. They're expensive, but they're slow. There's this headbutting that goes on. But if I go out and do a $50 million project and I get a change order from a contractor who thinks that's the way to make money, is the change order made to death? Oh, I didn't know about this, you didn't know about that. And all of a sudden you have $2–3 million of change orders. And let me tell you, it's a battle to argue with. My own construction company isn't us sending a change order. They try occasionally, but they know better than that. Because the guy who owns that construction company is also the partner of the project. So to your point, there are some real benefits of having that.
Right, your interests are aligned.
Mhm.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes, Victor, your question.
Oh, yes. Can you talk about the factors within the market research that contributed to the publics that you identify in Charlotte? There was all industrial, and like the apartments that are around there. The one that's like generating really, really high rent.
Brownfields?
Yeah, the brownfield.
Yeah, the one on South Boulevard, it was so obvious to us that it was in Publix's. We went there and we called up Publix, and you're not going to believe what we found. this is nirvana. There are 3,200 apartments built and occupied. There's 2,100 more apartments under construction. Not just talked about, cranes going here, and we can drop you right into the middle of it. Their regional real estate representative in Charlotte said, I don't like the site. I was like, you're an idiot. You know, so it was like, no, you really need to like this site. And the problem is they moved the guy from a different region. He'd never done urban deals. We just bypassed him effectively and went to his boss's boss. And they drove it and said, wow, this is astounding. It looks a lot, the exact words are, it looks a lot like this came in 18,000. You know, so it really, it's with grocery stores, it's mouths.
Right.
It's eating mouths.
No, because when I saw the picture, I thought that it was all industrial, and then the planning of those developmental apartments was still in the process while you chose it. Not that it was already.
There were still more going, there was still more being approved. Go to Google Earth and check out Southline now, if they have new photos. It's just amazing. Traffic's horrific, but they've got great white grills.
Emmanuel, do you have a question? Emmanuel, you had a question?
Our professor was teaching us today about special purpose corporation? SPs. So I was just curious about how is now set up, like when you guys do a deal, you guys use like SPE, and then how do you do the transaction between the construction and the real estate and the architecture? Is it like one big giant corporation?
Good, Justin, anybody?
We set every project up a separate entity. We usually use an LLC, and then so for instance, if I'll act as the development manager, the representative of the ownership, so I will hire Styles Architecture and have a separate contract with them just with our this particular LLC, and then I'll have a contract with Styles Construction just with this particular LLC, and it will be a separate transaction where they'll. This project, we're treated as the owner, not just for Styles Corporation, but just for this one project in general. And we'll do that with every single consultant that works on the project. Same thing with, the leasing agents, and we have an exclusive listing with them, and then they have to go market the property for us, and we sign all the leases in the name of that particular entity.
Right, but if you look at the signature page of a partnership document, there's layers of LLCs for legal reasons. Will be the managing partner, general partners. Then sub-investor groups. I mean, it's LLC by LLC, but it's really to insulate the rest of your assets. So it's truly a single-purpose project.
And then either way, it's still always the same people that are signing those documents for each individual partnership.
Yeah, Truly, you had a question.
Back on the same subject, I have two questions actually. What do you outsource? Zoning, attorneys probably?
We outsource typically technical consultants. If Jessica was dealing with traffic, we have traffic consultants. We have
Traffic consultants, so planning, planners.
zoning. There are some great zoning attorneys. We can, if it's a simple zoning, we'll try it ourselves. Up until about a year ago, we had a guy in-house that did a lot of that for us, but we just didn't have help them. But if I'm going to the city of Pembroke Pines and I need to get a rezoning done, I'm on the phone with Dennis Milley, who's the zoning attorney, who's just unbelievably capable, knows all the city commissioners. When you go in for zonings, picking the right zoning attorney is really critical. It really is critical.
And the second question I had was Southline. You got a tax break on that, incremental every year.
Yes,
Was that
for
enough
5
to
years.
offset the cost of your environmental cleanup?
Yes. Yeah, that's the concept. And what was interesting about it is we thought they were going to tie it to true cost, and they really didn't. They just said, here's what it's going to be, and if you can do it for less, knock yourself out. Just get it done.
So let me just make a comment. Actually, back in 2001, I sat on the ULI panel in Charlotte, which was the South Corridor panel.
Great.
And Peter Pappas
Sure.
basically ran the whole thing. And
Runs most of the city.
Yes, well, yes, that's correct.
He's a great developer.
That's right. And so, and just saw him out in ULI in San Francisco this week while you were out partying wherever you were.
It seemed like it.
It seemed like it. But the point that I want to make here was that here, finally, in 2001, Peter and all the other city fathers and mothers, if you will, put this whole concept together. They could densify the South Corridor from the uptown, which is Charlotte's downtown, all the way south, and create a transit-oriented corridor. Now, transit-oriented development in Charlotte is very different than transit-oriented development perhaps anywhere else. But, so essentially 10 to 15 years ago, they set the groundwork for this. This is how long it took. And they built the line, if you will, and all of a sudden, all these parcels along this line, I mean, it's been incredible where the value has been created. And they seized that advantage. And
Yeah, when we met with one of the city officials about 6 months ago, I thought the number he said was it's about 8.8 billion of new real estate taxable value was created in the last 5 years, 7 years. It's a great ULI case study because it's one of the few times that it actually worked well. It was well thought out, and when you need approvals for something in that area, it's passed. There's no arguments.
Whole groundwork for that. Stephen, you had a question.
Yeah, you know, I drove down Bonnie Drive, the one plantation deal that sticks out its foot on.
Thank you.
So how are you guys able to bypass the height restrictions on plantation?
We didn't go over the height restriction. The city of Plantation has a Midtown Development District, which goes from University Drive out to Pine Island Road 595, over almost where American Express was. And they did an overlay district, and they said, we want more density. And we have a whole new set of rules that apply to the Midtown District. And our building is 4 feet less than the maximum height. We actually could add 4 feet. But like the 24-hour Midtown behind the fountains, you know, same heights. Everybody's pretty much in the identical heights. But they asked for it. They wanted height. And we have many cities. We have a piece of property out in Sunrise right now, out by Sawgrass Mills, and every time we go for approval, they go, nope, it's not high enough.
Too much density can be a bad thing.
Yeah.
All right, Claudia's question.
Yes, thanks. It seems like Styles is a one-stop shop. I was just wondering.
That's what it says on the card.
You said you have architects. I was wondering if you've got engineers on board, attorneys on board, and accountants on board, especially with all those LLC that you have to form and do all
Lawyers
these.
love us. No engineers, too technical, too specialized. Also, liability issues with engineers, a lot more than architects. The lawyers now outsourced. We had an in-house counsel. They're specialists for everything. We have attorneys that do just our LLC partnerships. We have attorneys that do just our anchor leases. We have attorneys that do our contracts and acquisitions. You know, guys who are really good at special things. It's very rare we use one attorney for a whole project for anything. Legal bills are.
Chat?